Why is the current royal house of the United Kingdom known as the House of Windsor, despite descending from the German Saxe-Coburg-Gothas? And where does the name Mountbatten come into it? What is the king's surname, assuming he ever needed one, which he actually doesn't? And why are some members of the family Windsors, while others are Mountbatten-Windsors, and some are neither? Let's find out. Let's start with where royal surnames, or names of royal houses, come from, and I'm talking about post-1066 England here. There are typically two sources. One is that it is the surname of some distant non-royal ancestor, think Tudor and Stuart. The other is that it refers to a place where the royal family originated. Think of the Hanoverians, who hailed from, you guessed it, Hanover. Neither of these sources explain why the current lot and their immediate ancestors are called Windsor though, or even Mountbatten-Windsor. In fact, the king's ancestral surname, on Queen Elizabeth's side at least, is something quite different. Let's jump in our time machines and head back to 1840 and the marriage of Queen Victoria to her cousin Prince Albert. Now, Victoria was a Hanoverian, though only once in my whole life have I ever seen her called Victoria of Hanover in a book, and it actually took me a minute to work out who the author was referring to. Albert, however, was from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, sometimes called Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, but I've opted to go with the fully hyphenated version and with that particular pronunciation of Gotha, because it's my channel and I can do that. Now, because the tradition then, and still a lot of the time now too, was for the wife to take the husband's surname, the name of the royal house was destined to become Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, though Victoria herself remained a Hanoverian, as monarchs retain the house of their birth, and the royal family's own website lists her as such. By the by, this is also why I'm happy enough referring to Mary I, Mary II, and Queen Anne as a Tudor and two Stuarts. Had any of them had surviving children who inherited the throne though, I think the name of the royal house might well have changed to Habsburg, Orange-Nassau or Oldenburg respectively, unless parliamentary legislation prevented it. Anyways, I don't want to get sidetracked, so back to Victoria's family. History generally accepts that her son, Edward VII, was a Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, as was his son, George V, who came to the throne in 1910. I could throw a spanner in the works, however, by quoting a blog entry from the National Archives of the United Kingdom, which states that there had been some dispute and confusion over what the name of the royal house actually was, since it had never been used publicly, either officially or unofficially. Was it Viper or Wetten, Welf or Gelf? Wetten was the name of the Saxon royal house, and Welf or Gelf was the name of the Hanoverian royal house. For the purposes of this video, and because nowadays it is Saxe-Coburg-Gotha which is spoken of as the house name preceding Windsor, I'm going to continue saying that Prince Albert's name and that of his male line descendants was indeed Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Everything was trundling along just fine for this rather Germanic British royal family until World War I broke out in 1914. Now, having a German last name was a serious PR problem, and it only got worse as the war progressed. In mid-June 1917, an air raid on London by German Gotha bombers killed scores of people, many of them children. Having his country bombed by planes which share part of his own name was a serious embarrassment, and the king was also acutely aware of the anti-German sentiment faced by the Tsarina of Russia, whose husband Tsar Nicholas had recently been deposed, and if you know your Russian history, you'll know that they and their whole family ultimately came to a tragic end, in part because George refused to offer them sanctuary in England. He didn't want his throne to go the same way as his Russian cousins, and so he acted swiftly. On the 17th of July 1917, he issued the following statement, printed in the London Gazette, which is moderately long, so get comfy while I read it out. By the King, a proclamation, declaring that the name of Windsor is to be borne by his royal house and family, and relinquishing the use of all German titles and dignities. George R.I. Whereas we, having taken into consideration the name and title of our royal house and family, have determined that henceforth our house and family shall be styled and known as the House and Family of Windsor. And whereas we have further determined for ourselves, and for and on behalf of our descendants, and all other the descendants of our grandmother Queen Victoria of blessed and glorious memory, to relinquish and discontinue the use of all German titles and dignities. And whereas we have declared these our determinations in our Privy Council. Now therefore, we, out of our royal will and authority, do hereby declare and announce that as from the date of this our royal proclamation, our house and family shall be styled and known as the House and Family of Windsor, and that all the descendants in the male line of our said grandmother Queen Victoria, who are subjects of these realms, other than female descendants who may marry or may have married, shall bear the name of Windsor. And do hereby further declare and announce that we, for ourselves, and for and on behalf of our descendants, and all other the descendants of our said grandmother Queen Victoria, who are subjects of these realms, relinquish and enjoin the discontinuance of the use of the degrees, styles, dignities, titles, and honours of Dukes and Duchesses of Saxony, and Princes and Princesses of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, and all other German degrees, styles, dignities, titles, honours, and appellations to us or to them heretofore belonging or appertaining. Given at our court at Buckingham Palace this 17th day of July in the year of our Lord 1917, and in the 8th year of our reign. God save the King. It was a popular move, as you can see by this cartoon published in the Punch magazine that same month, which depicts George sweeping away anything German-made. Let's dig into his statement and unpack what it meant in a bit more detail, though. The name was changing to Windsor. Why was that? The answer is because the family was now being named after one of its oldest and most famous residences, Windsor Castle, the epitome of Britishness. As for who exactly the declaration was affecting, the name change applied only to the male line descendants of Queen Victoria, who were British subjects, and excluded, quote, female descendants who may marry or may have married. Based on how this proclamation has actually played out over the last century, I take this to mean that the relevant women would be Windsors up until their marriages, though it's not abundantly clear in the wording here, and women who were already married would continue to use their husbands' names. King George also made a command decision that everyone descended from Queen Victoria, male or female, who was one of his subjects, would also relinquish all their German titles, effective immediately. Just like the name change, his wider family effectively didn't get a vote, as he aimed to make as clean and complete a break as possible. If you've seen my video on whether Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, could ever lose their titles, you'll know that I also mentioned there the fact that legislation enacted in 1917 and ultimately used in 1919 also allowed British titles to be taken off for men who were allied with Germany, because like I said, clean and complete break. The king couldn't force all his relations to change their names, of course, but some followed suit voluntarily. In particular, Prince Louis of Battenberg dropped his German titles and anglicised his name to Mountbatten. He was then created the Marquis of Milford Haven at the end of 1917. This is important to our story because Lord Milford Haven was the father of Louis Mountbatten, 1st Earl of Mountbatten of Burma, commonly called Dickie Mountbatten, and the grandfather, through his daughter Alice, of Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark, the future husband of Elizabeth II. Prince Philip's family were exiled from Greece when he was a baby, and he ultimately grew up all over Europe, but with much of his time spent in Britain and with his mother's Mountbatten family. When it came time to marry Princess Elizabeth, as she was then, he formally dropped his birth titles, took his mother's maiden name, Mountbatten, and was created the Duke of Edinburgh. This brings us to the next big change in the royal house's name. George V, his sons Edward VIII and George VI had all been Windsors, but the next in line for the throne was Princess Elizabeth, and she had married Philip Mountbatten in 1947. As per the stipulations in the 1917 proclamation, even though as monarch she would remain a Windsor, just as Mary I was a Tudor, Mary II and Queen Anne were Stuarts, and Victoria was a Hanoverian, her children were Mountbattens. The issue came to a head in 1952 when her father George VI died and she ascended to the throne as Elizabeth II. Dickie Mountbatten, uncle to Prince Philip, was heard to say that there was now a Mountbatten on the throne, which was not actually correct for the reasons I've just given, but it raised the spectre of another dynasty name change, and his bragging did not go over well with the new Queen's mother or paternal grandmother, the Dowager Queen's consort Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon and Mary of Teck. Very quickly, Elizabeth II issued the following statement. Clarence House, April the 9th, 1952. The Queen today declared in council her will and pleasure that she and her children shall be styled and known as the House and Family of Windsor, and that her descendants, other than female descendants who marry and their descendants, shall bear the name of Windsor. The Duke of Edinburgh was livid, reportedly complaining that he was nothing but an amoeba and was the only man in the country who couldn't give his name to his own children. This evidently remained a sore spot, for in 1960 yet another proclamation was issued, this time saying, at the court at Buckingham Palace, the 8th day of February 1960. Present, the Queen's most excellent Majesty in council. Her Majesty was this day pleased to make the following declaration. My Lords, whereas on the 9th day of April 1952 I did declare in council my will and pleasure that I and my children shall be styled and known as the House and Family of Windsor, and that my descendants, other than female descendants who marry and their descendants, shall bear the name of Windsor. And whereas I have given further consideration to the position of those of my descendants who will enjoy neither the style, title, or attribute of Royal Highness, nor the titular dignity of Prince, and for whom therefore a surname will be necessary. And whereas I have concluded that the declaration made by me on the 9th day of April 1952 should be varied in its application to such persons. Now therefore I declare my will and pleasure that, while I and my children shall continue to be styled and known as the House and Family of Windsor, my descendants, other than descendants, enjoying the style, title, or attribute of Royal Highness and the titular dignity of Prince or Princess, and female descendants who marry and their descendants, shall bear the name of Mountbatten-Windsor. Before I break this proclamation down for you as well, if you're enjoying this content, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel with the notification bell switched on. It's entirely free to do so and means that YouTube will let you know when I upload. You can also find me on Patreon, where I share bonus material including early access to ad-free videos, mini podcasts and blog posts. In addition, I have an Amazon storefront where I've gathered together some recommendations for history-themed books, TV shows, movies and more. Both are linked in the description box below for you, as is my Instagram account. First and foremost, the royal house is still called Windsor, and only Windsor. Second, the Mountbatten-Windsor surname only technically applies to people who don't have the title of Prince or Princess and aren't HRHs, meaning His or Her Royal Highness. Despite that, it has been used by people who do hold such titles on occasion. For example, the first instance on which it was used in an official capacity was in 1973 on the marriage register for the wedding of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip's daughter, Princess Anne. I've read that her younger brothers, Princes Andrew and Edward, used it when they married too, though I wasn't able to view any certificates online to double check, but the now King Charles certainly didn't for his second marriage and presumably didn't for his first either, but again I couldn't find a copy of the certificate of the marriage to Diana to check. The princes and princess did not need to do this, and I've always assumed that they opted to do so as a courtesy to their father, as none of them actually requires a surname. This is another thing which I think confuses people a great deal. The idea that monarchs, princes and princesses, and/or anyone else who has an HRH doesn't have a surname. They can belong to a royal house, certainly, but they don't have a regular surname in the way that most of us do. and that is alluded to in the 1960 proclamation when it talks about people, quote, "for whom therefore a surname will be necessary." If you need some evidence of the fact that Queen Elizabeth's children didn't need and don't generally use such an appellation, here are some examples of their signatures. In the modern world, however, there are many situations in which it simply isn't practical to have no surname unless a person is living on the fringes of society. I imagine it would be very tough to set up a bank account without one, for instance, or even fill out an online form for shopping. So when a surname is needed, the royals normally use their titles as a stand-in. Thus, Princes William and Harry were known as Prince William of Wales and Prince Harry of Wales before they were given their own dukedoms, and they used Wales as a surname. Prince Andrew, being the Duke of York, can use York as a surname, and at least prior to their marriages, his daughters could use it too. I'm not actually sure what they do now. Prince Edward, now the Duke of Edinburgh, can use Edinburgh, and so can his wife, the Duchess Sophie. I don't know, though, what Princess Anne and her younger brothers did before they married or had their dukedoms, but as that was mostly in the pre-digital age, it might have been easier to get along without a proper surname, or perhaps they used Windsor or Mountbatten-Windsor. Charles was made Prince of Wales as a child, so he could have used Wales. Incidentally, this practice of not using one's family name isn't just a royal thing. Dukes, marquises, earls, viscounts, barons, and their wives, plus women who hold such titles in their own rights, will not use them either, except in rare cases, like Princess Diana's brother Earl Spencer, where the title and the surname are the same. The Duke of Devonshire, for instance, whose seat is the famous Chatsworth House, well worth a visit by the by, will not sign himself Peregrine Cavendish, though Cavendish is the family surname. He will sign Peregrine Devonshire, or perhaps even just Devonshire on its own. So who does use Mountbatten-Windsor? Should they do so, and who should it definitely apply to? Well, if all the descendants of Queen Elizabeth II were following the 1960 proclamation to the letter, none of them would currently be using Mountbatten-Windsor for anything. Her children are all either a monarch or a prince or princess. Charles and Andrew's children are also princes and princesses, and although Edward's children don't use the titles of Princess Louise and Prince James of Edinburgh, they are actually entitled to them. Princess Anne's children and grandchildren have their father's names, as do Prince Andrew's grandchildren, and as for King Charles's grandchildren, they too are all princes and princesses. As you may know, however, the surname Mountbatten-Windsor has nevertheless crept in, and I don't just mean on the odd marriage certificate. When it was decided that Prince Edward's children would not use their HRHs or be styled as a princess and a prince, their parents opted to instead style them as the daughter and son of an earl. Their father was the Earl of Wessex when they were born. This meant that Louise was Lady Louise Mountbatten-Windsor. Boys use their father's subsidiary titles, so her brother started out as Viscount Severn and is now the Earl of Wessex himself, as their father has been upgraded to the Duke of Edinburgh. Then we have Archie and Lilibet. At the time of their births, because they were not the grandchildren of a monarch or the children of the Prince of Wales's eldest son, they were not yet entitled to be a prince or a princess. Archie could have been known by his father's subsidiary title, the Earl of Dumbarton, but it was decided not to do that, and he was introduced to the world as Archie Mountbatten-Windsor. Lilibet could have been known as Lady Lilibet Mountbatten-Windsor from birth, but again, she was not. It was only after the death of Elizabeth II and the accession of their grandfather to the throne, when they became entitled to be known as a prince and a princess, that they started using those titles. They now no longer have the Mountbatten-Windsor surname, as they use Sussex, because their father is the Duke of Sussex. So of all Elizabeth II's descendants, only Princess Lilibet had to use Mountbatten-Windsor at birth, and even she no longer needs it. Lady Louise is using it, but she doesn't technically have to, and she's the only person currently utilising it on a day-to-day basis. Going forwards, and I hope I get this right, but I'm sure people will be quick to correct me if I'm wrong, I think the children of James Earl of Wessex and Prince Archie, excluding their eldest sons, will be lords and ladies using the Mountbatten-Windsor surname. The exception would be if Prince Archie has a son before he himself inherits his father's dukedom, earldom and barony. In that case, I think his eldest son would be styled Lord, insert first name, Mountbatten-Windsor. Then once Archie becomes Duke of Sussex, the son would be known as the Earl of Dumbarton. It doesn't matter if James has a son before his father's death, because as I understand it, that dukedom is for life only, so James can't inherit it, and because I think his son would be able to be known as Viscount Severn from birth. I also suppose that if Lady Louise and or Princess Lilibet had children out of wedlock and opted to give those children their own surname, then those children could use Mountbatten-Windsor too. Of course, all this rigmarole applies only to the descendants of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. What about those who are descended in the male line from Queen Victoria, but not from Elizabeth? Well, they are still governed by the 1917 proclamation, meaning that if they have no title which would afford them a different surname option, such as a dukedom for example, they use Windsor. An example of this is Lord Frederick Windsor. He is the son of Prince Michael of Kent, whose father was Prince George, Duke of Kent, who was the son of George V. As the great-grandson of a monarch, Frederick is not entitled to be a prince or to have an HRH, just like Archie and Lilibet at the time of their births. But as the son of a prince who has no subsidiary titles, he is allowed to have the courtesy title of Lord. He was never able to use Kent as a surname because his father was not the Duke. This means that Frederick needs to use Windsor. There are some other examples of people who use it too, but I think I'll spare you from any more complicated royal genealogy and leave it there. So let's wrap this up. Why is the royal family called Windsor? Because George V changed the family name during World War I to distance them from their German roots and chose Windsor due to its very British connotations. Why do some junior members of the family of Elizabeth II use Mountbatten-Windsor? Because Mountbatten was Prince Philip's adopted surname, and a 1960 proclamation from the late Queen said that it would be the surname of those of their descendants who needed one. On top of that, some descendants who don't need a last name use it anyway on occasion. What is the King's surname? Well, he doesn't actually have one, but if he wanted to use one, then as the monarch, he could either take the name of his house, which is still just Windsor, or the family name Mountbatten-Windsor. I hope you've enjoyed this journey through the history of the names Windsor and Mountbatten-Windsor. Let me know in the comments if you think the House of Windsor should become the House of Mountbatten-Windsor, and to learn more about the family, I recommend you watch one of these options next. Whatever you choose, please enjoy, and until next time, keep learning.